Books make you hope. Books make you dream. Books make you laugh. Books make you scream. This is the Books That Make You show, discussing books with authors and experts, unraveling the inner pages of all the books that help make us who we are. Hosted by Desiree Duffy.
Welcome to the Books That Make You show. I'm your host, Desiree Duffy, and we're going to talk about books that make you get through a quarantine. Now, we're probably all feeling the effects of being isolated. Many are seemingly trapped in our own homes, doing what we can to just get through all of this. We're in a state of fear and panic, but yet that's juxtaposed against this idle time and, frankly, needing to find ways to pass the time. Maybe you've got the kids at home and they're just driving you crazy. Or maybe your family is far away and you wish your kids were at home to drive you crazy. Maybe you're working from home, or maybe you find yourself without work right now. This current situation is one where you don't know exactly what to do, but at the very least, one thing for certain is that we can escape momentarily, and one of the ways that we can do that is with books. We all know that there's benefits to reading. Cognitive issues are helped. It helps us learn. It helps us see the world through another person's eyes. It encourages empathy. It's a way for us to learn. And, you know, right now is a great time to start reading, to pick up that TBR list, that to be read list that you started, and get going on it. And if you've got kids, well, now's the time to read with your kids or to your kids. If they're old enough, you can give them books to read, little mini assignments. Have them do a book report. Maybe have them read aloud. Or if they're really creative and you want to have some fun, what if they performed a passage from a book? Or maybe they did a play. For you yourself, well, again, create your own reading list. Maybe expand your horizons and read outside your genre like you've always planned on doing. Find that online book club or join an organization like the Women's National Book Association, for example, or join a writer's group, especially if you're a reader and a writer. And if you are a writer, well, now is the right time to write. I tend to be an optimist. I like to see the good side of things. And, you know, right now I can't wait to see that wave of fiction and nonfiction that blossoms as a result of this time in history. Think now how you will contribute to it. We have an amazing guest today, somebody who has been here before, and I happily welcome back Diana Giovinazzo. And she is the author of the forthcoming book, The Woman in Red. She is an expert when it comes to historical fiction, and as well, she is the president of the LA chapter of the Women's National Book Association. And she is also one of the hosts of the popular podcast, Wine, Women, and Words. Diana, hi, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be back.
Oh, it's good to have you back. I feel so much like you have a unique perspective on everything that's happening. And I have to admit, following you on social media is what inspired me. I'm like, oh, I got to ping Diana. I haven't talked to her in a while because you are Italian. And your book, your forthcoming book that I want to talk to, we'll get into that in a little bit more detail, but it's historically based on a woman in Italian history. And you had posted on Facebook, and I've seen others do this because right now there's a certain kinship we feel with Italy because of what's going on there. It seems like a precursor to what's happening here in many ways. And you posted a picture of a building, and there was windows with people inside, and then somebody from across the way must have been projecting onto the building dance number with Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. And I just thought, that's so beautiful. Like, it's amazing how the Italians, or people in general, find a way to make the best out of any situation. And I just wanted you to maybe talk about that a little bit. Like, how do you feel your kinship with Italy is giving you some kind of unique perspective right now on the world that we're in?
It it is really interesting, and I love seeing that because it shows a lot of about the human spirit. It shows that even in the midst of this uncertainty, these tragedies, because we have to consider with Italy, they have more deaths now in that country than China did. Mm-hmm. And it's, completely heartbreaking when you stop and you think about it, but you see that spirit that they're going to continue on, they're going to keep doing things, and their life's not going to be stopped, even though they're stuck in their homes. And it's one of those things where I sit back and I look at it and it's like, what, I'm proud that this is where my ancestry comes from. I'm proud to have this connection. And I've actually talked to, I've got one friend who's in Italy, mm-hmm. and she and I talk via social media, and she's in Milan, and where they got hit the hardest for a while there. And, her advice, which I feel is like the best advice, is take it day by day. She's like, we have to take this day by day. And because you don't know what's going to end up happening tomorrow. We don't know if a month, 2 months from now, everything's going to get back to normal. It's, you can't plan too far out into the future. And so it's inspiring seeing this art come from it and this beauty come from such direness, I guess.
Yeah, and throughout history, and by the way, I don't know if it's being picked up, but it's like we have pirate radio breaking through the books that make you show right now. There's like this haunted show that's kind of coming through, and it's a real radio station here in Los Angeles. So somehow, and I'm not sure how technically this works because we tried to figure it out, but a radio station is breaking through on our Skype. I guess that's a thing now. So my apologies if anybody can hear talking in the background. We tried to fix it. We couldn't. We said, you know what? We're just rolling with it right now.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing. And to your point, rolling with it right now. Mm-hmm. Living in the moment, because that's what we have. It's such an existentialist point of view that all we are guaranteed at any moment in time is right now. And mm-hmm. when you see people making the most of it, I think that's a reflection of what the human spirit is all about.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And there are people that they've gone through a lot. You think about World War II and how hard they were hit. And even before that, there were decades of famine, especially in the South, constant wars within Sicily. And so it's a culture of survival. And they survived all of that, and they're going to survive this too. And so I feel like that's something that we can learn from, that, they can survive this. So we can pick up our bootstraps and stay on our couches and survive this as well. I mean, there's a great meme going around. They're like, your grandparents were called to go out to war, and you're being called to stay on your couch. You can do this.
That is so true. And that's such a great way to put it in perspective. Mm-hmm. And we were even kind of talking a little bit before we started the show. Oh, my God, what will happen if we lose the internet? That's the worst thing that can happen right now.
Exactly.
So let's talk about, because you're involved with organizations, and you yourself as a writer and somebody who reads, what kind of books do you suggest to read right now? Or perhaps what's on your reading list right now? What are you reading?
Right now, I'm really drawn to romance. The romance genre is just really feeding my soul right now. There's something about, whether it's the Hallmark movies that come out at Christmas time, which Hallmark Channel, by the way, guys, is putting out their Christmas movies again. There's just something that just really, that gives you that positive, warm, glowy feeling when you finish a romance novel and you're like, and it's like the world isn't so bad out there. And that's really what I've been drawn to. I just finished listening to Meet Cute on audio, and that was adorable, and I absolutely loved it. and I'm in the process of reading, because I'm one of those bookworms, I'm reading 2 books right now. I'm reading Husband Material by Emily Belden, and this one is it's a story of a woman who is out here in LA. She's in her late 20s getting her life back together, and then all of a sudden her deceased husband's ashes wind up on her doorstep. And so it's this mix of, romance with that tinge of reality sadness. And we got a chance to speak to the author on my podcast on Wine, Women, and Words back in January, I believe it was. February. I'm sorry, February, because we had her on for our Galentine's Day episode. Mm-hmm. And, she was a lot of fun, and the book was really interesting. And now I'm finally finding a chance to read all the books on my TBR list. That shelf that I have that is overflowing, this is one of those books. So I'm like, okay, I could actually catch up on things like my reading. And the other book that I'm reading is historical fiction by Alyssa Palumbo, and it's The Borgia Confessions, which is just wonderfully scandalous, and I love everything Borgia, especially when you're talking Italian history.
Exactly. And let's talk a little bit about your show, since you brought it up, Wine, Women, Words. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I love the way you guys talk to authors and you dig into the essence of what books are. Yeah, why don't you tell people a little bit more about where they can find it, so that especially if they're now looking for book recommendations and want to hear directly from some authors, they can check out your show.
Yeah, we are on Spotify, iTunes, pretty much everywhere that you can find a podcast. We are there. We're also on Instagram, and we're constantly posting pictures of the books that we're reading, my co-host Michelle and I. And yeah, we just this last week we sat down for this week's episode, and it was just her and I, no guest, and there was just something magical about being able to sit down and just get silly. And we were talking about the Borgia Confessions and about up to chapter 12. So if you guys listen to that, there will be a few spoilers up till chapter 12 of the Borgia Confessions. But we just started talking about like random Italian history facts. Apparently, I am like Rain Man when it comes to the history of Italian food. We discovered. Because I know when the tomato was introduced to Italy, and also when Nutella was invented. 2 very, very important things, mind you.
Oh, well, now you have to dish here. So tell us when. Tell us.
Okay, so the tomato, they believe, came to Italy in the late 1400s, early 1500s with, I want to say it was Cortez that they say who brought the tomato to Italy.
Okay.
And that's when you start to see tomatoes, various different types of tomatoes being grown, I should say, in the Italian soil. They really took on the different variations, and then it just kind of eventually, by the end of the 16th century, just kind of took over the Italian culinary scene. Mm-hmm. And then in the late 1940s is when Nutella was invented.
Okay.
And I want to say it was invented in Naples, but I might be wrong on that.
Oh, that's fascinating. I do remember reading somewhere that when the tomato was brought to North America, people thought it was poisonous, and they called them love apples. And I'm going off the top of my head, so I didn't Google this, but I do remember there was somebody in history who basically sat down with a bucket of tomatoes and ate them to prove that they weren't poisonous. And then that's how people in North America, I think it was probably in the colonies, decided, hey, we can eat tomatoes too.
Exactly, yeah. When they came to Italy, they initially kind of came almost like a caprese salad is basically, I don't know if it was necessarily the caprese salad. For those of you who aren't familiar with a caprese salad, it's tomato, basil, and mozzarella. Mm-hmm. And they kind of did it, they didn't cook it at that point. They were slicing it up and eating it like an appetizer. And then it eventually ended up being cooked up for sauces and whatnot.
Okay.
And it's so interesting to know that something that we so associate with Italian culture, Italian cuisine, was how many, 500 years ago, 600 years ago that it came around. So it's fascinating. And now we're like, we can't think of it. We associate tomatoes with everything that's Italian.
Yeah, exactly. That's spaghetti sauce. That's marinara sauce. That's exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It is interesting how a culture like that will take on one ingredient and kind of capitalize on it. It's amazing, really.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that you know this. And let's dig in because
I don't know how I know this, but I know this.
Well, you study historical things because of the fact that you write historical fiction. So I have to imagine you're absorbing this as you're reading and doing research on your writing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's little things that within historical fiction that you kind of have to know. Things like, what were toilets like in this area? What kind of cooking situations did your characters have? What did they dress like? What kind of accessories did they have? What kind of hairstyles did they have? I even have there's a thing called etymology.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually have a tab on my browser where I have to go back and I have to look at the origins of certain words to see if something is too new for the language. Because historical fiction readers, they will pick it out. If something is too modern, they're like, what the hell? Like, I actually made I was looking at using the word trek. Trek, trekking over the mountains, was basically the sentence. And I kind of looked at that and I'm like, I wonder if that's too new. And in my head, I was thinking Star Trek. But I was like, I wonder if. And turns out the word trek was, I want to say it was like 19th century was when that came into play. And it came into play in North America. And it came because people were trekking along the Oregon Trail. And that's how the word came into our vocabulary. And I was like, this is not going to work for my characters because this is just like about 20 years before that time frame that this word was invented, and they were in South America. So I have to rearrange this whole sentence now.
Oh, let me ask you this. This has always fascinated me because if you're writing a period piece, historical fiction, to me it seems that there's a difference between how you're writing as the narrator or the perspective, the point of view, and how the characters are actually talking, the dialogue. Because it seems to me if I'm writing something that was based in the 1700s, if I was going to write it true to that era, I would be writing in a version of that language that is now semi-antiquated. We wouldn't readily recognize parts of it. I mean, even if you go back to English, Old English and New English, even what Shakespeare was writing in, and that was only several centuries back, it would be cumbersome to read in that.
I know.
So I mean, can't we give historical fiction writers a little bit of the benefit of the doubt? Because if they really wrote true to the language of the day, it would be difficult to read, right?
It's a fantastic point. I agree with that point. But I can't see things like wowzers or okay, or even the word fine. The word fine, when somebody responds to you or going, well, fine then. That wasn't until, and that use of the word fine wasn't until the 20th century. It was used a different way prior to that. So there's little nuances that we sometimes need to be looking at just to kind of keep things period within a manuscript. Even though we're not writing in that specific language, we're still trying to keep it more towards the authenticity of it.
Yeah. And you're right. Historical fiction fans especially, they'll call you out on that in a heartbeat. So talk a little bit about your book, because I think the last time we talked, and there's a previous episode, people can go back. I encourage them to go back and listen to the first show with Diana, way back when, shortly after we first started the Books That Make You show. But so tell us, because since then the book is now coming out. It's scheduled for the summer. Tell us about The Woman in Red.
The Woman in Red is the historical fiction version of the life of Anita Garibaldi. And Anita Garibaldi was the wife of Giuseppe Garibaldi, who made Italy pretty much what it is today. Italy wasn't a country until 1860. And so he was this rebel who was fighting against Austria, who controlled the north. There was a whole other kingdom in the southern portion of Italy. And so he got kicked out, and he basically became a mercenary, fighting and, hanging around in southern France, and then going to South America and living in South America and Brazil. When he was there, he met this woman. She was 18 years old, technically already married, and they fall in love. And Anita is just this amazing, inspiring woman who went from being a gaucho in southern Brazil to fighting with him, following him to Uruguay, fighting with him there, leading women there. A lot of times she did her fighting while pregnant too, mind you. Mm. And then she traveled with him from Uruguay to Italy, and helping in the initial years of the unification.
Amazing. And I love too how you took her story and brought it to light. Because so often in his story, we hear about the dude, we hear about the guy, we hear about him. So bring in Anita's perspective, because she was so integral in that, is just so commendable. Thank you for doing that. I applaud you for that.
Thank you. When it came to writing her story hadn't been told from a female perspective at all, nor had it. And historically, there's been over the years, there's been some historical fiction novels in other countries that were told from a woman's perspective. But at least for the historic perspective, the historians, they weren't women historians. They were the men that were publishing these historical novels, or not novels, historical nonfiction. About her. And when I was looking at that, and then looking at, there's been a ton of books about Garibaldi, about him and his campaign, and the men that were writing that, they were making her a footnote within his story. In his memoirs, she was anything but a footnote. She was the love of his life. In his journals, he wrote that she was the woman that he still wept for 10 years after the death, the queen of his soul. And it was just, it kind of felt like this was one of those points within the historical record where I felt like this woman was getting robbed. Her story wasn't being told. It wasn't being shared, and nor was it being shared from her perspective. And when I sat down, reading everything, I wanted to try to get it as close to her perspective, to her story, really respecting what she was about and what her story was about as much as I could, and just getting that out and just exploring what it was like. 'Cause so much of historical fiction is exploring what it's like to be in this time frame. When you look at, what historians do, and the nonfiction of, so-and-so, Anita fought this battle during the Ragamuffin War. And then there was this great ship battle off of the coast of Laguna. And then they trekked through, see, I use the word trek.
It's a good word.
Yes, it is a very useful word. But they trekked through Rio Grande do Sul, and then they lost that war, so they went to Uruguay. And so you see the factual, this, and this happen. These very factual details of these people's lives. But the one thing that historical fiction can bring to it is the humanity side of it. As you mentioned, and as many studies show, people who read fiction are more empathetic. And so we have this opportunity through historical fiction to wonder what it was like for these people. What was it like for this woman to leave everything behind in Brazil, to defy her mother, to walk away from what society expected of her, and to choose a life of her own? What was that like for her? What kind of what was her thought process? What went behind those decisions? How scared was she? How brave was she? And so we have that ability to be able to do that through fiction. And I think that's the beautiful thing about historical fiction in general.
I could not agree more. And I do think, too, I remember back in high school, even college, learning history was just dates and battles and wars and leaders. You're so right. I mean, maybe if more women had written history books, they would have more soul to them. Because nowadays, historical fiction as a genre, it does tend to be read more so by women than men. And I would have to suggest, especially because that's the topic of the show, what are we doing now with this extra time on our hands? If you've never read historical fiction, now's a great time to pick up one of those books.
Oh, yeah.
And, yeah, because it does. It kind of shows you the world through somebody else's eyes at a moment in history, and it's just beautiful.
Absolutely. Alyssa Palumbo, her book, The Borgia Confessions, is out right now. We're reading it for our book of the month for the podcast, so I highly recommend that one. Kate Quinn is another great historical fiction author. Stephanie Dre and Laura Camoy, they write along the same lines that I do with the biographical historical fiction. Their last one was about Eliza Hamilton, the wife of Alexander Hamilton.
Nice. And
that would be a good one to pick up, especially given how much we love Hamilton in the musical. So that's great for any Hamilton fans.
Perfect idea. I love that. And I got to ask you, too, since your book is getting so close, have you received a proof of it or an advanced reading copy? Ooh.
I have advanced reading copies of it. I have. I just did a giveaway on my Instagram this past week due to the quarantine. I sent out a bunch. I gave somebody a copy of it to read during quarantine. So the book comes out August 4th, which I don't know if this is a spooky thing or a really cool thing. It's the anniversary of Anita's death.
Okay. I think it's a little bit both. It's beautiful and spooky at the same time.
Yes.
Oh, well, congratulations. Just tell me how it feels when you held the book in your hand for the first time.
Oh, my God. It was unreal. It was just, I did this. That moment that just... Because when you're writing a book, it was 3 years of writing and research and a full year of working to get my agent. And then it was just like holding onto a train and letting the train just take loose after that once I got my agent. But yeah, holding it and it's still a little bit of disbelief. When I saw the cover, the proof of the cover, I saw that before I got the physical book. I honestly cried when I saw the cover.
Oh.
It brought tears to my eyes.
I bet. And it's so wonderful for me because I've seen the journey and I've seen the progress. So I'm just so elated and happy for you. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, as a writer, let's pivot over there because right now seems like a great time to be writing as well. Yeah. What tips? What thoughts do you have for people who are sitting there right now going, okay, I should write? Any thoughts or ideas?
I would say block out the news as much as you can because that's such a huge distraction and it's such a killer for creativity. I fall into the trap myself. This week I've had some days where I just can't focus because it's all of the terrible news. So I block that out. Mute playlists are great. Create a playlist for songs that get you thinking about your story, and just sit down and write. Block it out and write. It's this is a great time. I saw recently somebody else posted that King Lear was written while Shakespeare was in quarantine. For the pandemic. So every time I sit down, I'm like, all right, I'm going to write my King Lear. I'm going to do this. I'm going to get the Pulitzer written during this time.
Well, and I wonder 6 months to 2 years from now, what kind of literature, what's going to come out of this? Because you know that there are going to be wonderful things that blossom out of this.
There's going to be some great sci-fi that I'm sure will come from this.
Oh, yeah.
You know, those dystopian novels. We might get some fun romances from it. I hope there's some fun romances from it, because this would be, you know, really great romance writing time. What if you're stuck in the house with you know, your husband that you don't like anymore? What are you going to do then? I mean, just there's great ideas out there.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And even speaking of turning off the news, I really wish we could turn off whatever is going on in the background there. Like, they keep breaking through our broadcast. So hopefully it's not too distracting for people who are listening. But I agree. I mean, sometimes you just have to unplug from the world around you. And now is the perfect time to do it, because we're kind of supposed to unplug. So that's all great advice. Now, tell us a little bit about the Women's National Book Association, and the organization itself is doing several things right now that people can take part in. There's an online readathon, etc. You want to talk about that?
Yeah. So the Women's National Book Association, we've been around for quite a while. Nationally, we're over 100 years old. And in LA, we try to focus on our authors and really helping our authors and connecting them with readers, and just, you know, we're a great community. I like to say that we are a sorority of bookworms. I was never a part of sorority going through college. That totally wasn't my thing. But if I had a sorority that was just about reading books and talking about books and exchanging books, I would be all over that. And that's pretty much what we are. So right now we do have a Instagram page. It's WNBA_LA. And I'm sure, Desiree, you could share the links for that as well.
Sure thing.
And we have a hashtag called WNBA_LA Reads. I know it's a total easy hashtag there, but we're trying to see how many books we can read before this quarantine is over. I want to see us all reading. I want to see us all sharing our books. And, you know, we've had 3 of our board members post, and I need to post a new update with our current one. I posted one. I was reading a great thriller earlier this week called The Last Flight that comes out in June. And then we've got in 5 years, our vice president was actually on Good Morning America. They taped an episode of Good Morning America with her book club.
Oh, nice.
Prior to this whole quarantine, social distancing thing. So we got to share that the other day. Another board member is reading The Memory Painter. So we'll be sharing what everybody's reading, what everybody's listening to on audiobooks, and just really creating this space of sharing books and encouraging others to read books and pick up new books. And we are doing some flash giveaways. We are going to be able to send some books out in the midst of all of this craziness, because I know Amazon is slowing down and halting some of their book sales between now and early April. So you're going to have to wait a while for your books, but we have books that we can give out.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and then it's still in the works. I don't have many details on it yet, but keep an eye out on our Facebook this week. Follow us on Facebook, because we are going to be working on a week-long takeover of our Facebook page. We're going to have a number of Facebook Live events going on during this week, or however long we want to do it, really. And we're going to be bringing on authors, mostly local authors, who have had events canceled because of the coronavirus, this really isn't fair to a lot of people. We're all, there are people who health-wise are being hit hard by this, but it also sucks for those of us whose lives are upended, where it's so exciting to have your book come out, and it's finally coming out, and then this happens. So you don't get those readings, you don't get those launch events, and it's going to suck for sales too. So we want to try to do stuff that's going to help support them and to support local bookstores. We do have a local bookstore lined up to be able to do some sales. and be able to deliver some sales. So we want to support our local community as much as we can. So keep an eye on our Facebook page because we got some great initiatives happening.
Excellent. I love it. Bravo for everything. And then really quick, let people know where they can find you online, and especially keep up to date for information for when your book comes out.
The best where I post the most is going to be my Instagram, and that's Diana G. Author. That's pretty much where I am on Twitter and Instagram. My website is dianagiovinazzo.com, and you can go there, sign up for my newsletter. I share bits about Italian history, updates about the book. I may be releasing something very cool and coming up in the next newsletter, so you might want to hop on that, especially if you're a music lover.
Okay. Excellent. I love it. Diana, thank you so much for joining us today. I need to have you back more often because we always have such a good time, and you've got so many great ideas. You've got so many things going on.
Thank you.
You bet. And once again, thank you, everybody, for listening today. This has been the Books That Make You show. And just a little reminder that we've got something kind of fun and exciting coming up, too. Mark your calendar. May 9th, we are doing labookfest.com. It's an online book festival. Since we can't do that LA Times Book Fest this year, we can't do some of the events just like what Diana is talking about, we're going to be doing an online book festival. We're going to celebrate authors and different organizations and groups and people within the bookish community. So mark your calendar. May 9th, that's a Saturday, and go to labookfest.com to sign up for more details, and we'll keep you posted on all the bookish fun things that we've got going on with labookfest.com. Once again, my name is Desiree Duffy, your host for the Books That Make You show, and you can always find out more about us and all of the books that make you who you are on our website. That's booksthatmakeyou.com. We are also on Facebook and Instagram, and we have a newsletter too, so sign up for that and stay abreast of all of the things that are going on in the bookish world. Until next time, my friends, please be safe and enjoy all of the books that make you exactly who you are.
The executive producer for Books That Make You is Desiree Duffy. Produced and sound mastered by Phil Giangrande. Engineering by Dave Nabox. Social media and promotion by Bree Sweeter. For more, visit booksthatmakeyou.com.